I'm your host, Chase Levitt, and today I am honored to be joined by Colby Jenkins, who is running against Celeste Beloy for the Republican nomination in Utah's second congressional district. Colby, thank you so much for coming on.
You bet. Thanks, Chase. It's an honor to be here. Appreciate it.
Of course. First and foremost, just want to tell the audience who may not know you who you are and why you decided to run against Congresswoman Malloy.
Yeah, thank you. And congratulations to you on being such a dominant, incredible voice for your generation. I really admire how you are involved and really trying to lead and help people stay informed. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
So just yeah, a little bit about me. I'm a Utah native. I was born and raised in small town Roosevelt, Utah, in the Uinta Basin. And 31 years ago, I left the basin to go to the United States Military Academy at West Point. And that launched me into a career in the military where I became a combat veteran Green Beret. I've led a Special Forces A team around the world in Afghanistan, other counter drug hostage rescue missions in South America. And then coming out of combat, my command sent me to Washington, D.C. To actually serve in a different battlefield, working with different tribal chiefs. And so I worked in Congress as a Green Beret liaison to the Senate first for a while, and then over in the House of Representatives, and then back into the Pentagon for several years, where I was a legislative director. I was a strategic advisor in the Pentagon for the chairman and the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So I've worked at the highest levels, really, of our government. And but coming out of that bureaucracy, I knew there's more to life than government bureaucracy and government work. And so I jumped into the corporate world and worked with some of our most innovative thinkers solving complex problems. And that career path has taken my wife and I and our two children really around the country. But home has always been Utah. My wife and I are both Utah natives. And so we had some land here in St. George that we bought next to my in-laws. And when COVID hit, we thought, why are we anywhere else but home? And so I found a job that brought us here to St. George. We built a home, and this is where we're at and have been for many years. But do you want me to get into why I
Yeah,
ran too?
go
Answer the
into
part?
kind of what differs you from Celeste Malloy and why are you challenging an incumbent? Because that's no easy task.
Yeah, for sure. Challenging the establishment is a challenge for sure. But why I'm doing this? So I never imagined I would be a congressman. I've never had this like in my career path. I did work in DC for 9 years, so I'm very familiar with how Congress works and the legislative process. But really, where the fire started in my gut was when now coming up on 3 years ago when our country blew out of Afghanistan and the disgrace and the debacle that happened there. I would never argue that we've had 20 years of mistakes in Afghanistan. We certainly could and should have done better. But just the way that we blew out of there, I thought, uh, as an Afghan veteran, how in the world do we have leaders that think that that is okay? Both in uniform and out and just that just grinded in my gut. How do we have leaders that think that's okay? And when Chris Stewart resigned last year, my congressman, that opened a door for potentially acting on that. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, at that time, I had just started a new job, a new civilian job, and I'm a national director, so my team was spread across the nation, and I there was no way I could onboard a new job and try and mount a campaign in 2 weeks. And so I was a precinct chairman. I'm a state delegate. I was and a senior veteran. So I thought I'll just get involved and support those candidates. And I attended all the debates or the debates I could. There were 11 candidates last year,
Yeah.
and that process produced Celeste. And when I saw that play out and I got to know more about her background, how she wasn't even a registered Republican, wasn't even a resident of Utah, hadn't even voted in four of the last, just on and on. I knew I needed to do something, and that's what got me off the sideline and caused me to get into the race. And I first was an exploratory candidate last fall, just testing the waters to
Yeah.
see if there'd be a good response, and there was tremendous response. So, a lot of buyer's remorse with Celeste,
Yeah.
and they were coming to me, and so here we are.
Well, let me just first off say thank you for your service to our nation. And thank you for your service when it comes to stepping into this race. Like I said, challenging an incumbent isn't easy, especially with one like Celeste Malloy, who has a lot of ties to DC, a lot of ties to Congressman Stewart, and his team and all that. And so I want to thank you for that. And what are some differences between you and Celeste? I know there's some things that she's voted on, such as the NDAA and the omnibus bills that you have often criticized her for. Let's talk about the NDAA and what specifically, why would you have voted differently than her and that? So,
Yeah, great question. And I'll just lead with what makes me different, and then we'll talk about the votes. What you're going to get from me is what you've gotten for 31 years already, and that's sworn defense of our Constitution. I've bled for this nation. I've fought for this nation. I have friends who've died for it. So when a lot of times on the campaign, you'll hear a lot of lip service. Well, I'm going to fight for the Constitution. Well,
right,
with me, that's what I've done, and that's what I'm still doing. I'm a colonel. I wear the flag on my shoulder. I'm still serving in the reserve. So having the opportunity to stand up and defend our Constitution with my voting, with the way that I debate, with the issues I bring up, is what you're going to get. But specifically about the NDAA, so the National Defense Authorization Act. This is a bill that I worked on for 9 years when I was in DC. So it's not something I'm new to or that I'm naive to the process. So for me to say that I would vote no on the NDAA is a big deal as a military guy, as someone who's worked on it. And that caused a lot of people to say, well, why? Like you're asking
right,
why. And so the NDAA is a bill that passes every year. It's a must-pass bill. It essentially allows the military to keep functioning. And so last year, at the end of the year, when it was set to pass, the Democrats in the Senate parachuted in what's called FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It's a power that allows the federal government to spy on external agents speaking to US citizens. But in the process of scooping up that communication, the FBI, the CIA scoop up your communication, my communication, and they should not access that unless they have a warrant. That's the law. That's what the Fourth Amendment provides us. But true to form, the government for 20 plus years has been abusing that FISA database, and they've been spying on Americans. And Senator Lee and others have been calling that out. So that power was set to expire last year, but the government has to have that power.
right.
And so they parachuted in a reauthorization and they attached it to the NDAA bill, knowing that the NDAA has to get passed. So we'll attach this poison pill to it and hope that everyone holds their nose and passes it on down. So Senator Lee, Rand Paul, on the House side, Thomas Massie, Jim Jordan, Chip Roy, all the constitutional conservatives voted no. No way. We cannot allow this to continue.
Yeah.
Well, Celeste Malloy, Blake Moore, Mitt Romney, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden signed it. All of them voted to give the government a pass and extend that. And so I would have been a hard no just on that. And that's not a vote against the military.
Yeah.
That's a vote for the military. That's a vote to say we're not putting something that's unconstitutional on the backs of our military. And so that's why I would have voted no on that particular issue.
Right. And oftentimes Celeste Malloy will say, you know, we had to do this. We have to fund our military. We have to do this. But when there's these things that are just thrown in, it's like Senator Lee gets criticized for his amount of no votes because they're like he's not doing anything. But oftentimes these small things get shoved into bills that people don't really realize, and they have to be voted no on, or else it impacts our constitutional rights. It causes them to spy on Americans, like you're mentioning with the FISA, and stuff like that. So, another thing I want to ask you about is you often criticize Celeste Malloy about her votes on the omnibus bills. Why would you vote differently on those?
Yeah, and great question. I'm so glad that you're paying attention to these huge issues because it's critical.
Yeah,
And to your point about voting no. So imagine on the NDAA and then also on the omnibus bills. Imagine if the Republicans, we have a slim majority, if all of them would have voted no. That's not a no vote on the bill. That's a vote no on FISA.
yeah,
That's a vote no on earmarks or agenda items that are against the majority. If enough people like Senator Lee had stand with him and vote no, then we actually vote yes. When I hear Senator Lee voting no on something, we should ask ourselves, well, what is he voting yes to? Because he's voting no on this, but he's voting yes to lower inflation. He's voting yes to defending your individual liberties like our founding fathers wanted. And so it may be deemed as not getting things done, but I would argue you're not sending me to DC to get things done if this is what gets done.
Yeah.
34 now $35 trillion in debt. You're not sending me to DC to fund the government. You're sending me there to control spending. And with these omnibus bills, that's exactly the contrast between my opponent and I, a huge contrast. So $1.2 trillion came down the pipe to support the Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer policy agenda. We, the Republicans, have a slim majority in the House. So how does that pass then? If we are the majority,
Right.
well, it passed because every Democrat voted yes, every one of them. So you got to give them credit. When it comes to spending our dollars, they stick together,
Yeah, for sure.
lock, stock, and barrel.
We
But the
definitely
only
did.
way that passed, the only way that passed is they picked off just enough Republicans to join them to get it across the line. And one of those Republicans was Celeste Malloy
Yeah.
and Blake Moore and Mitt Romney, not once, but twice. And so for me, like Senator Lee, like others in the House side, like Thomas Massey, Chip Roy, Jim Jordan, for me, you're going to get someone who says, no, we don't vote on 1,000, 2,000 pages of bills that I don't even know what's in
Yeah.
until we can follow the process. 12 appropriations bills. They have time to sit and breathe. They have the opportunity to be debated, to be amended. That's what you're hiring me to do, not go and fund millions to someone else's border, or in this bill, to send more than $2 million to a clinic that performs late term abortions. That's not what you're hiring me to do.
Right. You talked about Senator Lee a lot, and he endorsed your campaign. Why do you think that Senator Lee put his trust in you over Celeste Malloy?
Yeah, and think of what he did. I don't think he's endorsed against a sitting Republican
Yeah.
in the Utah delegation, maybe ever. And
Yeah.
so why? Well, he sees what's at stake. We have Celeste, who's been in office now 7 months, who's already had these catastrophic votes with the challenger breathing down her neck. So
Right.
imagine what she's going to do when she doesn't have that pressure or that scrutiny. Then she's embedded, and
Right.
she's in that uniparty, and that's not what we're being hired to do. So when Senator Lee saw her voting record, it's nothing against her personally. I don't strike out at Celeste as a person. It's her
Yeah.
voting record, her decision making. That's not what we're being hired to do. And so Senator Lee took time to get to know me, took time to interview and vet me. And then seeing that I'm a constitutional conservative, a combat veteran who's not going to be drink the Kool-Aid and just get in line like Celeste has.
Yeah.
He That's what he wants. He wants another fighter in the foxhole with them, not just another person who's been bulldozed and become a rubber stamp.
Right. And I definitely agree with Mike Lee's endorsement of you. He
Thank
did it
you.
for right reason. Um, Now on the other side, Celeste Malloy was recently endorsed by President Trump. I want to hear your reaction about that.
Yeah, it's we can look at each other with a straight face and say that Trump Trump got hoodwinked on this.
Yeah.
Celeste Malloy is a never Trumper. She's called President Trump a dictator. She's criticized people, the January 6th crowd. She didn't even support President Trump until after Nikki Haley dropped out of the
Yeah.
race, and then she says, "I'll support the Republican nominee." So what clearly happened here is Speaker Johnson flew down to Mar-a-Lago 2 days ago, met personally with President Trump, and while neither one of us was in the room, we can imagine what happened. He said, "President, I need Celeste and probably another slew of members who are pliable, who are obedient, who've voted every way the speaker has asked." And he looked at the president and said, "I need these sheep to keep following me. They don't want me in the mix. The speaker doesn't want me back
Right.
there saying, I don't think so. That's not constitutional. That's not within our budget." He doesn't want someone like that, and so that's essentially what happened. And frankly, it's it's not a surprise that Trump would have stayed on the sidelines in our race because we're not a big national race. We're not flipping
Yeah.
the seat from blue to red or vice versa. But the speaker wants another sheep in the fold, and that's exactly what happened. And I frankly think this endorsement will hurt her. She's known as an ever Trumper. Her moderate base is going to say, "Well, what gives? We've gone from never Trumper to MAGA Malloy. So will
Right.
the real Celeste Malloy stand up?" and
Right.
and that's a contrast. People know what they're going to get with from me. They've gotten it for 3 decades. I'm not going to flip flop just to get an endorsement.
Right. And you've supported Trump throughout you've openly supported
Correct.
Trump throughout this cycle, and you supported him in past cycles. Am I correct in that?
Correct. Yep. Voted for him both times and will again.
Right. And Celeste Malloy has always been kind of, she doesn't, she won't say. And so that leads you to assume that, okay, yeah, she probably didn't. And so when Trump came out with that endorsement, it just made me kind of wonder. I was like, that's interesting. But I think your
Yes.
explanation of that is we could assume that that's a very safe assumption. Now I kind of want to get into if you are elected, well, we'll say when you are elected, what are the things that you want to do right when you get to Congress on day one? What are you going to look to fix, to change, or implement?
Yeah, great questions. And going into that day one, the task is going to be building my A team. I'm a builder of teams. That's my background, being a special forces A team leader. So making sure that we arrive and hit the ground running so that we can work efficiently, effectively for our constituents. And the number one issue that I hear throughout our 13 counties and question I get asked is, what will you do to close the border? And so my first priority is working with the new Trump administration, and removing any legislative obstacles that prevent executive action from taking place quickly, efficiently, that we can roll back the catch and release, that we can reinstate remain in Mexico, that we can actually appropriate a border wall instead of, like Celeste Malloy voted for, building more processing facilities. We don't need any more processing facilities. We need to
Right.
close the wall, close the border. So that's my first priority, helping that happen. And then priority 1A is to our veterans. I need to make sure that we examine the promises that we've made to our veterans, and really by extension our senior citizens with Social Security and so forth, that we honor those promises. There are too many broken promises and too many lives that are being lost in the veteran community. And then priority two, slash maybe 1C, would be building that relationship of trust with the new BLM director under the new Trump administration, so that the damage that's been done by the Biden administration on our water and on our land issues here in Utah and our district specifically, that I have that relationship to make sure that we immediately start to turn those changes back, and that we look at the Antiquities Act, that we look at the powers that the executive branch has that have just been abused, that have directly impacted our land, that have allowed people like Obama and now Biden to push out national monuments way too far, that encroach upon our land, our ability to develop, to have multi-use opportunities, and to even access water and resources. So working to fight for our water and land once again, with hopefully now a better ally, will be a huge priority.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Now I kind of want to know, we have a week left, under a week now until election day. What's your plan for the next week because, this is a big race. You still, even though you've been going at it for a while now, there's still voters you need to reach. How are you planning on getting to them?
Yeah, so really get out to vote effort is huge. We have volunteers in every county that are working diligently, not only with their own networks, but compounding on their efforts. If every person texts 10 of their friends and confirms that they got their ballot and then encourages them to vote for us, then that just spreads. And so that organic grassroots effort is front and center for us. But then we're also trying to maximize our outreach via text, our radio ads, making sure that the name recognition and what we stand for is more easily accessible. And then just beating the bushes. Senator Lee and I did 4 town halls, 4 rallies in 4 different counties over the weekend. And so just building on that momentum, having events both in person, me making phone calls, mailers going out. I understand there are some outside groups that have come in to help as well, to make sure that the message gets out far and wide. So those are things we're working on right now.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say real quick, for all of you listening, that I'm proud to support Colby in this race. We need someone who isn't just going to go back to Washington, go along and get along. Someone who's just going to keep voting for the same old, the same status quo. We need someone who will actually go there and force the real conservative values back on Washington, bring real Utah values to Washington, and I think Colby will do that. And so, Kobe, I just want to ask you real quick, if you can just give your message to Utah, a message that to people who may feel like there's no hope, feel like we're going in a direction that we can't bring back. What's your message to them?
Yeah, and you set it up perfect. Hope. As I've been across the trail, I get asked that often. One, why would you even do this? Why would you get into this chaos? And what gives you hope for being in it? And my message of hope comes literally from my own family. Um, Years ago, before I deployed to Afghanistan, our second daughter was born. Her name's Olivia. She was born 3 weeks before I deployed to combat. We already had a 3-year-old daughter, but now we had a 3-week-old daughter. And as knowing that this was going to happen, my wife and I named Olivia Hope. And we specifically attached hope to her in the hope that I would survive combat, in the hope that I would be able to be her father, in the hope that I would come back. And fortunately, I did come back. I survived multiple deployments, and now Olivia Hope is at West Point herself, and she's wearing our nation's uniform. And in 2 years, she'll be a young lieutenant stepping into this hot mess. And so when people ask me where I get hope from or why I have hope, well, I literally have hope in my life by
Yeah,
virtue of my daughter and both of my daughters. But by extension, Olivia Hope and her generation, they give me hope. They've stood up, and her class at West Point specifically, they've raised their hands already and swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution. And so I take hope because they demand leadership, judgment, and accountability. And that's what I'm stepping up with my team in hopes of delivering so that her and your generation can have the leadership, judgment, and accountability that you deserve. No more of, like you said, the status quo. That's driven us into a 35, now $36 trillion debt that we're approaching. No more of that. Our founding fathers intended for the Constitution to be defended, not compromised on. So with me, that's the mission that we're taking, and that's what we're hoping to deliver for you. So
right.
thank you, Chase. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, of course. We need people now more than ever to not just take the oath, but to defend the oath. And
Yeah.
I fully believe that you will do that when you go to Congress. And I want to wish you the best of luck in your race. I'll be watching closely. Where can people find you? Where can people go support you? Stuff like that.
Thank you. So our website is colby4utah.com, colby, Utah.com. And we've got tremendous resources there. You can see endorsement clips from Rand Paul, from Vivek Ramaswamy, and a number of soldiers who've served with me. There's even a testimonial there from one of the soldiers that was in a helicopter with me that was shot down in combat and what happened afterwards. So yeah, I would love for people to see and learn more about that there.
Awesome. Well, for everyone, just remember that primary election day is next Tuesday, June 25th. Make sure to go out and support Colby if you live in Utah's second congressional district. Colby, thank you so much for coming on. It was an honor.
My pleasure, Chase. Thank you and keep leading. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I will.